The imperial palace of Dracoria was built for war, not for babies. Its walls were made from black stone that had survived firestorms. Its ceilings were carved with the victories of dragon emperors. Its halls were wide enough for full-grown dragons to walk through without folding their wings. Every corner smelled of old smoke, sharp metal, and power. But that morning the palace smelled like milk, warm cloth, and panic. The emperor's private nursery was not quiet. It was never quiet now. A small dragon hatchling, no taller than a human child, screamed with a voice that shook the glass in the windows. Another hatchling clawed at the floor, leaving deep marks in stone. A third one snapped at a silver feeding spoon, crushing it like paper. And standing in the middle of all this chaos were 5 trained imperial handlers, 3 royal mages, and 1 terrified doctor. None of them knew what to do anymore. The handlers wore thick armor made from dragon bone. Their arms had burned scars. Their faces showed fear, but they tried to hide it. They had faced battlefields. They had tamed war beasts. They had carried wounded soldiers through fire. But these were the Emperor's baby dragons, and they were worse than any war. The doctor stepped back as a hatchling lunged toward him. A mage raised a glowing hand, but the Emperor's voice thundered through the room before the spell could form. No magic. Everyone froze. The Emperor of Dracoria stood at the doorway, tall and terrifying, his scale deep crimson with golden lines running across his body like living armor. His eyes were sharp, like a blade. His crown was not made of gold, it was made of the bones of his enemies. Behind him stood 2 royal guards, silent as statues. The Emperor walked into the nursery slowly, his claws clicking against the stone. The baby dragons paused for a second as if they could feel his power. Then one of them screamed again. The Emperor's jaw tightened. "They will not be controlled by force," he said. "They are my blood. They will not be harmed." The doctor swallowed. "Your Majesty, we are not harming them. We are trying to feed them." One of the handlers spoke, his voice shaking. "They bite, they burn, they kick, they scream. We cannot even wrap them in cloth. They tear it apart." The Emperor stared at the hatchlings. They were small, but already dangerous. Their wings were still soft, not fully grown, but their claws were sharp. Their eyes were bright and wild. Their scales were pale gold, like sunrise. They should have been peaceful. Hatchlings usually slept most of the day. But these ones did not sleep. They fought. They raged. They refused everything. The Emperor had conquered 12 star systems. He had broken the armies of the Sky Clans. He had crushed the rebels of the Outer Moons. He had forced entire worlds to kneel. And yet, in his own palace, he could not calm his own children. The Emperor's voice lowered and something heavy entered it. "How many have you lost?" The room went silent. The doctor looked down. "2 caretakers, Your Majesty." The Emperor's claws curled. "Dead?" The doctor nodded. "They were burned," he whispered. "1 was bitten. The poison, it was too fast." The Emperor did not move for a long moment. Then he turned his head slightly toward the royal guards. "Leave us." The guards hesitated, but they obeyed. The nursery doors closed. The Emperor stepped closer to the hatchlings. They hissed at him, but none attacked. They knew him. They feared him. They also wanted him. 1 hatchling crawled toward him, then stopped, shaking like it was angry and confused. The Emperor reached down slowly and touched its head with 1 claw. The hatchling flinched. Then it snapped at his claw. The handlers gasped. The bite did nothing. The Emperor's scales were too hard. But the action was shocking. Baby dragons did not bite their father. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. He pulled his claw back and stood tall again. "They are sick," 1 mage said carefully. "Maybe something is wrong with their blood." The Emperor stared at the mage. "My blood is perfect." The mage fell silent. The Emperor turned away and walked to the window. Outside, the palace gardens were full of black trees and stone statues of fallen enemies. The sky above was bright, but the air felt cold. The Emperor spoke without looking back. "This is becoming a weakness." No one answered. He continued. "My enemies are watching. The Empire hears whispers. They say the Emperor cannot even control his own hatchlings." A handler took a slow breath. "Your Majesty, no one would dare say such things." The Emperor's tail struck the floor once. The sound was like a drum. "They dare," he said, "and they will act." The doctor stepped forward. "Your Majesty, we need time. We need a safer method. The Emperor raised 1 hand. "I have already tried everything, you know." He turned back toward them. "I have brought the best mages, the best doctors, the best handlers. I have threatened them. I have rewarded them. I have given them every resource." His voice grew colder. "And still, my children scream. Still, they bite. Still, they burn." One hatchling screamed again, almost as if it was answering him. The Emperor's eyes flickered. Then, for the first time, he looked tired. Just for a second. Then the tiredness vanished, replaced by iron. "There is one option left," he said. The doctor frowned. "What option?" The Emperor looked at the mages. "Bring the human." The room froze again. The handlers exchanged looks. The doctor blinked. "The human?" One mage stepped forward, nervous. "Your Majesty, humans are weak. They have no scales, no claws, no magic. They are fragile." The Emperor's eyes burned. "That is why they are useful." No one understood. The Emperor walked to a table where broken feeding tools lay in pieces. He picked up a shattered spoon and crushed it in his claw without effort. "These hatchlings do not respond to power," he said. "They do not respond to magic. They do not respond to fear." He looked at the baby dragons. "They respond to something else." The doctor whispered, "And you think a human can do it?" The Emperor's voice was quiet now. "I do not think. I know." The mages hesitated. "Humans are not allowed in the palace." The Emperor's eyes turned sharp again. "Then allow one." The doctor spoke quickly. "Your Majesty, a human would not survive. They would be killed within minutes." The Emperor's expression did not change. "Then find one who will." The room was silent. Outside the nursery, far away from the black stone palace, on the edge of the empire, there was a human medical ship. It was small, old, and plain. It was not a warship. It was a rescue vessel that traveled between poor colonies. On that ship, a young human nurse named Alara sat at a metal table, cleaning a child's bandage. Alara was not a soldier. She was not important. She was not famous. She was simply kind. She had soft hands, calm eyes, a quiet voice. She had worked in disaster zones. She had held dying people. She had saved babies who had no chance. She did not know anything about dragons. She did not know anything about emperors, and she had no idea that her life was about to change. A warning alarm sounded on her ship. The captain's voice came through the speaker. "Unknown imperial vessel approaching. They are demanding docking access." Alara looked up. "Imperial vessel?" The ship shook slightly as something massive moved outside. The lights flickered. Alara stood slowly, her heart beating faster. A moment later, the airlock door opened, and two armored dragon guards stepped inside. They were taller than any human. Their armor was dark. Their eyes were cold. Behind them, a royal messenger held a sealed scroll marked with the Emperor's symbol. The messenger spoke in broken human language. "Human nurse, you are ordered to come. The Emperor requires you." Alara's mouth went dry. She looked around the room. Everyone was frozen. She pointed at herself. "Me?" The messenger nodded once. Alara did not understand why, but she could feel something in the air. Something big, something dangerous, and somehow something like a child crying in the distance, even though she could not hear it. Yet, the Imperial ship was silent from the inside, but Alara could feel the power in it. The walls were smooth black metal, not painted but grown, like it had been shaped by heat and pressure instead of tools. The hallway lights were dim and warm, like sunset. The air smelled clean, but also strange, like smoke after rain. Alara walked between two dragon guards. Their heavy steps echoed behind her. She kept her hands close to her body and tried not to stare at their claws. She had worked with dangerous people before, but this was different. These were not angry humans. These were creatures built for war. Her small medical bag hung from her shoulder. It suddenly felt useless. She was led through many halls. The palace was huge. Every door was tall enough for a full-grown dragon. Every pillar had carvings of battles. Every wall showed symbols she could not read. She felt like a small dot inside a mountain. At last, they reached a wide door guarded by 4 royal soldiers. The soldiers opened it without speaking. Warm noise hit Alara's ears. Screaming. Not normal screaming. It was sharp, wild, and full of anger. The sound made her stomach tighten. The guards pushed the door open wider, and Alara stepped into the nursery. The room was bright compared to the hallway. Light poured from a large ceiling window. The floor was polished stone. Broken tools and torn cloth were scattered everywhere. And in the middle of the room, 3 baby dragons were fighting like tiny storms. One hatchling was biting a cushion and shaking it like prey. Another was clawing at the wall, leaving deep lines. The third was rolling on its back, kicking and screaming, smoke puffing from its mouth. Around them stood handlers and mages, all keeping their distance. They looked like strong warriors, but their faces showed fear. Then Alara saw the Emperor. He stood near the window, tall and still, like a statue made of living fire. His eyes moved to her. The room went quiet for half a second. The screaming stopped. The baby dragons turned their heads. They stared at Alara. Alara froze. Every instinct in her body told her to step back. But she did not. She forced herself to breathe slowly. She had learned long ago that fear spreads. Children feel it. Animals feel it. Maybe dragons felt it too. The Emperor spoke in a deep voice. Human nurse. Alara bowed slightly, unsure of the correct way. Your Majesty. The Emperor studied her. You are small. Alara did not know what to say. Yes, sir. A handler snorted softly, as if insulted. The Emperor ignored him. You have cared for young ones before. Alara nodded. Yes. Human children. Sick children. Newborns. Injured children. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. My children are not human. Alara swallowed. I understand. One of the mages stepped forward. Your Majesty, this is pointless. The human will die. Alara's fingers tightened around her bag strap. The Emperor turned his head slightly. If she dies, then she dies. But if she succeeds, the Empire survives. Alara's heart jumped. Empire survives? She looked at the baby dragons again. They were staring at her with bright eyes. Their scales were pale golden ivory. Their heads were shaped like small snakes with horns. They were beautiful. In a dangerous way, they looked angry. They also looked scared. Alara took one slow step forward. The nearest hatchling hissed and spread its tiny wings. Alara stopped and lowered herself to her knees, making herself smaller. She spoke softly, not to the Emperor, not to the handlers, but to the hatchling. Hello, she said. The hatchling blinked. Alara kept her voice calm. You're okay. I'm not here to hurt you. The hatchling's nostrils flared. It sniffed the air. The other 2 hatchlings slowly crawled closer. Alara did not move. Behind her the handlers whispered, She is insane. She is going to be burned. She is not wearing armor. Alara heard them, but she stayed focused. She had seen this before, in different forms. A frightened child who fought everyone. A baby who screamed because they did not feel safe. A patient who attacked nurses because pain made them panic. These dragons were not evil. They were overwhelmed. Alara reached into her medical bag slowly and pulled out a soft cloth. It was a simple white towel. The hatchlings watched her hands. Alara placed the cloth on the floor in front of her, then moved her hands away. The nearest hatchling leaned forward and sniffed it. Alara smiled slightly, soft. She whispered. The hatchling touched it with one claw, then pulled back. Alara did not rush. She looked around the nursery. There were broken bottles, shattered bowls, and pieces of metal spoons. There were also burn marks on the floor. She could see why people had died. The dragons were not only biting. They were breathing small bursts of fire. Alara looked up at the Emperor. Your Majesty, may I ask a question? The Emperor's eyes stayed on her. Alara spoke carefully. How old are they? The doctor answered quickly. 3 weeks since hatching. Alara nodded. And how often do they sleep? The doctor hesitated. They do not. Alara frowned. They never sleep. A handler said, only a few minutes. Then they wake and attack. Alara's face grew serious. The Emperor stepped forward. What does that mean, human? Alara took a breath. It means they are not resting. It means their bodies are stressed all the time. That makes them angry. That makes them wild. The doctor blinked. But why would they not sleep? Alara looked at the hatchlings. Because they don't feel safe. A mage laughed once harshly. Safe? This is the Emperor's palace. Alara did not look at him. Safe is not only walls and guards. Safe is feeling understood. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. Explain. Alara chose her words slowly. When babies are born, they know nothing. Everything is loud. Everything is bright. Their bodies feel strange. Their hunger hurts. Their skin is sensitive. Their stomach cramps. They do not understand, so they cry. The Emperor stared at her. Alara continued. If no one calms them, they cry harder. They fight. They bite. They burn. They'd do anything to protect themselves, the doctor whispered. That sounds possible. The hatchlings moved closer again. One of them crawled near Alara's knee. Alara stayed still. The hatchling lifted its head and looked at her face. Alara felt her breath catch. Its eyes were not mindless. They were intelligent. And there was something else. Loneliness. Alara slowly reached out one hand, palm down, fingers relaxed. She stopped a short distance away. The hatchling sniffed her hand. Then very slowly it touched her fingers with its nose. A handler gasped. The hatchling did not bite. It simply pressed its face to her hand for 1 second. Alara's eyes softened. "Hi," she whispered again. The hatchling made a low sound, like a small purr. The other 2 hatchlings moved closer too. Alara gently pulled her hand back and reached into her bag again. This time she pulled out a small bottle of milk formula meant for human infants. The doctor stepped forward. "That will not work. Their stomachs." Alara raised a finger slightly, asking for patience. She opened the bottle and poured a little into a clean bowl that was still unbroken. The smell of milk spread. The hatchlings sniffed the air, their heads tilted. Alara pushed the bowl slightly toward them. The first hatchling leaned forward and licked it. Its tongue was warm. It froze, surprised. Then it licked again. The second hatchling moved in and tried to. Soon all 3 were drinking, not attacking, not screaming, just drinking. The room was silent. The handlers stared like they were seeing a miracle. The mages looked confused and angry. The doctor, his mouth hung open. The emperor stepped closer slowly. His eyes were locked on his children. The hatchlings drank quietly, their bodies relaxing. Their wings folded. Their claws stopped scratching. One hatchling leaned against Alara's leg while drinking. Alara did not move. She simply stayed with them. After a few minutes, the hatchlings finished. They blinked slowly. Their eyes looked heavy. One of them yawned, smoke puffing gently. Then, for the first time in weeks, one baby dragon laid its head down on the soft cloth and fell asleep. The second hatchling curled beside it. The third hatchling crawled closer to Alara, pressed its head against her knee, and closed its eyes too. The emperor did not speak. He stood over them like a mountain, but Alara could feel something change in the air. The rage was gone. The fear was gone. Only quiet remained. The emperor's voice finally came, lower than before. "Human." Alara looked up carefully. The emperor stared at her, his expression unreadable. "What did you do?" Alara answered honestly. "I fed them. I stayed calm. I treated them like babies." The emperor's eyes flickered. Then he spoke words no one expected. "Remain here." Alara's heart beat faster. "Your Majesty?" The emperor's gaze hardened. "You will not leave the palace. You will care for my children." Alara swallowed. I can try, but I need supplies. I need help. I need safe rules." The emperor's tail moved slowly. "You will have anything you ask." One mage stepped forward quickly. "Your Majesty, this is dangerous. She is human. She could be a spy." The emperor turned his head toward the mage. The mage stopped breathing. The emperor's voice became cold. "If she were a spy, she would not have calmed my children." The mage stepped back. Alara looked down at the sleeping hatchlings. They looked peaceful now, but she knew this was only the beginning. Because calming 3 baby dragons was one thing. Living in the emperor's palace was another. And somewhere beyond these walls, enemies were watching. They would not wait forever. The next day, the palace felt different. It was still the same dark stone, the same tall halls, and the same cold imperial silence. But now there was something new moving through the air. It was not smoke. It was not fear. It was gossip. Servants whispered behind curtains. Guards spoke quietly near doors. Mages watched the nursery from a distance, as if it had become a holy place. The story had spread fast. The emperor's baby dragons had slept, and a human nurse had made it happen. Alara woke up in a room she did not recognize. The bed was large, soft, and covered with warm blankets. A golden lamp glowed gently beside her. She sat up quickly, confused. Then she remembered. The emperor had ordered her to remain. She looked down at her clothes. Someone had washed them. Her medical bag sat neatly on a chair. A small tray of food was on a table. Bread, fruit, and a cup of warm tea. Alara stared at it for a moment. She had expected chains. Instead, she had been given comfort. That made her more nervous, not less. A knock came at the door. Alara stood. "Come in." The door opened and the imperial doctor stepped inside. His face looked tired. His hands held a thin tablet. "You slept?" he asked. Alara nodded. "A little." The doctor sighed. "Good. You will need it." He looked around, then lowered his voice. "You should know many people are angry that you are here." Alara's stomach tightened. "Why?" The doctor's eyes flickered. "Because you did what they could not, and because you are human." Alara sat back down slowly. "I didn't come here to make enemies." The doctor gave a dry laugh. "That does not matter in a palace." He stepped closer. "The Emperor is not only a father, he is the strongest ruler in this galaxy. If he looks weak, the Empire will fracture. If the hatchlings stay wild, enemies will strike." Alara frowned. "Enemies?" The doctor nodded. "Rebels, rival clans, other dragon houses, even allied planets. Everyone is waiting for a crack." Alara's hands clenched. "So the babies are political." The doctor looked uncomfortable. "Everything is political here." A loud scream echoed from far away. Alara stood instantly. "That's them." The doctor nodded. "The hatchlings woke. They are hungry again." Alara grabbed her bag and followed him out. As they walked through the halls, Alara noticed more guards than before. Their eyes followed her. Some looked curious, some looked angry, some looked disgusted. One servant bowed quickly, but avoided eye contact. Alara kept walking. When she reached the nursery, she heard the hatchlings again. Their screams were not as wild as yesterday, but still loud. Their small claws scratched at the floor. The handler stood back, nervous. The Emperor stood in the corner, watching. Alara entered calmly. The hatchlings turned their heads and saw her. They froze. Then, to everyone's shock, they crawled toward her. One hatchling bumped into her leg like a child asking for attention. Another rubbed its head against her bag. The third sat and stared, waiting. Alara felt her chest tighten. It was strange. These creatures could kill her in seconds, but right now they looked like toddlers. Alara sat down slowly and placed a soft cloth on the floor. Then she took out the milk formula again, mixed it carefully, and poured it into bowls. The hatchlings drank. This time, no one screamed. The handlers watched in silence. The Emperor stepped forward slightly. Alara glanced up at him. "Your Majesty, may I speak freely?" The Emperor's eyes stayed on his children. "Speak." Alara spoke in a calm voice. "They need routine. Same feeding times, same sleeping times, same quiet space. They also need warmth, soft bedding, and less noise." One maid scoffed. "Drans do not need bedding." Alara looked at him. "Babies do." The mage's face darkened. The Emperor's gaze shifted toward the mage. The mage lowered his head and stepped back. Alara continued. "They also need safe touch, gentle holding, not armor and shouting." A handler looked insulted. "We did not shout." Alara looked at the handler. "Your body shouted. Your fear shouted." They felt it. The handler's jaw tightened. The Emperor said nothing, but his eyes stayed sharp. After the hatchlings finished eating, Alara carefully lifted one of them. She supported its body like she would hold a human baby. The hatchling tensed for a second. Then it relaxed. It did not bite. It did not burn. It simply leaned into her arms. The room went completely silent. Even the Emperor looked surprised. Alara rocked gently, humming a simple tune under her breath. The hatchling's eyes closed. It fell asleep in her arms. The other two hatchlings crawled closer and pressed against her legs, sleepy. Alara felt the strange weight of their trust. The doctor whispered, "This is impossible." The Emperor's voice was quiet. "No, it is human." That sentence spread through the palace faster than any official order. By midday, Alara was no longer a secret. She became a symbol. Some saw her as a miracle. Others saw her as a threat. That evening, Alara was walking back to her room with the doctor when a group of mages stepped into the hallway ahead. There were 4 of them. Their robes were dark. Their eyes were cold. The leader, a tall mage with silver horns, smiled without warmth. "So," he said, "the human nurse." Alara stopped walking. The doctor stepped slightly in front of her. "Move aside. The Emperor has commanded." The mage raised one hand. A thin wall of blue light appeared, blocking the hallway behind them. The doctor's face went pale. Alara's heart beat faster. The mage looked at Alara like she was a bug. "You think you belong here." Alara kept her voice steady. I am here because the Emperor ordered it. Mage laughed softly. The Emperor is blinded by desperation. He is a warrior, not a caretaker. He does not understand what you are. Alara did not move. What am I? The mage stepped closer. A weakness. Alara's stomach tightened, but she forced herself to stay calm. I'm helping the hatchlings. The mage's smile faded. No, you are changing them. Alara blinked. They are babies. The mage's voice sharpened. They are dragon blood. The Emperor's blood. They must grow strong, ruthless, fearless. They must learn dominance. They must learn that the galaxy bends to them. Alara's eyes narrowed. They can be strong without being cruel. The mage's expression turned dark. That is human thinking. Alara took a slow breath. Maybe dragon thinking is wrong. The doctor whispered, Alara. The mage's eyes flashed with anger. Then he spoke slowly. We have served this empire for centuries. We have shaped dragon rulers. We have guided wars. We have raised emperors. He leaned closer. And we will not allow a soft human to poison the Emperor's heirs. Alara's voice stayed calm. I am not poisoning them. I am caring for them. The mage raised his hand again. Alara felt the air change. The hallway grew colder. The doctor stepped back, shaking. Alara's instinct screamed to her to run. But she did not. She looked the mage in the eyes. If you harm me, she said, the hatchlings will scream again. They will go wild again. The Emperor will know why. The mage hesitated. His hand stayed raised, but his eyes flickered. Then he lowered his hand slowly. The blue wall vanished. The mage smiled again, but this time it was sharp. We do not need to harm you, he said. Not yet. He stepped aside. The other mages moved with him. Alara and the doctor walked past them. Alara kept her face calm until they turned the corner. Then she let out a shaky breath. The doctor whispered, you should not speak like that to them. Alara's hands trembled slightly. They threatened the babies. They threatened me. I won't stay silent. The doctor looked at her with worry. You do not understand how deep palace politics go. Alara swallowed. Then help me understand. The doctor nodded slowly. I will. Because if you fail, we all die. That night, Alara could not sleep. She sat on her bed thinking. She was in the Emperor's palace, surrounded by enemies, raising baby dragons that could burn her alive. And yet, when she closed her eyes, she saw the hatchlings sleeping peacefully against her. She heard their soft breathing. She remembered how they had leaned into her arms. She remembered their loneliness. Alara whispered to herself, they are just children. Outside her door, somewhere in the palace shadows, someone watched her room. And far beyond the palace, in the dark space between star systems, a rebel fleet changed course. They had heard the rumor. The Emperor's heirs were unstable. The Empire was distracted. Now was the time to strike. The warning sirens began at dawn. They were deep and slow, echoing through the palace halls like the heartbeat of a giant. Red lights flashed along the walls. Guards ran past Alara's door, their armor clanking loudly. Alara woke instantly. She sat up, her heart racing. She had learned the palace sounds quickly, and this sound was not normal. This was danger. She grabbed her medical bag and rushed out into the hallway. Smoke drifted faintly from the ceiling vents. Servants were shouting. Some were crying. Alara! The imperial doctor shouted as he ran toward her. The rebels have entered the outer system. They are attacking. Alara's blood ran cold. Attacking the palace? Yes, the doctor said. They know the Emperor is vulnerable. Another explosion shook the walls. The floor trembled under Alara's feet. The nursery, she said instantly. The doctor nodded. The Emperor is already there. They ran. As they moved through the halls, Alara saw guards forming defensive lines. Mages raised glowing shields. The air smelled like heat and metal. A loud roar shook the palace. Not a baby dragon, a full-grown one. The Emperor had entered the battle. They reached the nursery doors. 2 guards stood outside, tense but alive. Alara pushed inside. The nursery was no longer calm. The hatchlings were awake and screaming. The lights flickered. Dust fell from the ceiling. Each distant explosion made the baby dragons cry louder. Smoke puffed from their mouths, and small flames danced along the floor. They were terrified. The Emperor stood in the center of the room, his wings half spread, his claws glowing with power. He looked ready to tear the palace apart. Clear the room, he ordered. Take the hatchlings to the bunker. The handlers rushed forward with armored carriers. The hatchlings screamed harder. One snapped at a handler's arm. Fire burst from its mouth. The handler fell back screaming. Alara ran forward without thinking. Stop. Everyone froze. The Emperor turned sharply. Human, get back. Alara ignored him. She dropped to her knees between the hatchlings and the handlers. They can't be moved like this, she said quickly. They're scared. You'll hurt them. They will die if they stay here. The Emperor growled. Alara looked up at him, her hands shaking but her voice steady. They will die if they panic. Another explosion shook the palace. The ceiling cracked slightly. Time was running out. Alara looked at the hatchlings. They were pressed together, screaming, fire leaking from their mouths. Their eyes were wild again. She took a deep breath. She reached out and placed both hands on the floor. Hey, she said softly, even as alarms screamed around her. I'm here. The hatchlings did not calm. Alara swallowed. She made a choice. She pulled the hatchlings close to her body, wrapping them gently in soft cloth and pressing them against her chest. Gasps filled the room. Human, a handler shouted. They will burn you. The Emperor took a step forward. Alara, release them. Now. Alara closed her eyes. She focused on her breathing, slow and steady. She remembered crying children under falling buildings. She remembered holding patience while bombs exploded outside. She remembered staying calm when everything else burned. I'm here, she whispered again. You're not alone. The hatchling screams weakened. Their fire died down. They pressed against her warmth. One small claw hooked into her sleeve. Another explosion rocked the palace. A blast wave shattered the nursery window. Glass exploded inward. The Emperor turned instantly, spreading his wings to shield them. Shards of glass struck his scales and bounced away. Smoke filled the room. Through the chaos, Alara stayed still. The hatchlings shook, but they did not scream. They clung to her. The Emperor stared. He had seen soldiers face death without fear. He had seen planets burn, but he had never seen anyone do this. Alara, he said, quieter now. We must move. Alara nodded slowly, but not like this. Let me carry them. The handlers stared at her like she was insane. They weigh too much, one said. Alara adjusted her grip. I can. The Emperor hesitated. Another explosion hit, closer this time. The palace shook violently. Do it, the Emperor ordered. Alara stood carefully, holding all three hatchlings close. They were heavy, warm, and trembling. Fire flickered near her hands, but did not touch her skin. The Emperor led the way. They moved through collapsing halls, guards fighting along the way. Mages cast shields around Alara instinctively now. She became the center of the group. Enemy fire struck the palace exterior. A section of the ceiling collapsed ahead. The Emperor blasted it aside with raw force. Alara, he said without looking back, if you fall, I will not save you. Alara answered honestly, I know. They reached the emergency bunker entrance. It was a massive door made of reinforced black alloy. The Emperor slammed his claw against the control panel. The door opened. Inside, it was dark and quiet. Alara stepped inside and sat down immediately, her legs shaking. She slowly unwrapped the hatchlings. They curled together and pressed against her stomach and legs. They were alive. The bunker door sealed shut. The outside sounds faded. Only breathing remained. Alara leaned back against the wall, exhausted. The Emperor stood over her. You risked your life without hesitation, he said. Alara looked up at him. They needed me. The Emperor was silent. Minutes passed, then hours. The bunker lights flickered on. A voice came through the speaker. Outer defenses holding. Rebel ships retreating. The Emperor exhaled slowly. The war had been short, but costly. When the doors finally opened, the palace was dashed. Smoke stained the walls. Broken stone covered the floors. The Empire had survived, because the hatchlings had survived. News spread quickly. The human nurse had shielded the Emperor's heirs during an attack. Some mages were furious. Others were silent. The people whispered a new story now, not weakness, trust. Later that night, Alara sat alone in the nursery. The hatchling slept peacefully, curled together on soft bedding she had requested. The Emperor entered quietly. He watched them for a long time. Then he spoke. My enemies attacked because they believed I was weak. Alara said nothing. They were wrong, he continued. But not for the reason they think. He turned to her. You have changed something in my children. Alara looked up. I gave them safety. The Emperor nodded slowly. And in doing so, you changed the Empire. He stepped closer. There are those who will never accept this, he said. They will move against you. Alara met his gaze. Then protect the hatchlings, even if that means protecting me. The Emperor's eyes hardened. I do not protect humans, he said. Alara's heart sank slightly. Then he finished. I protect what is valuable. Alara felt something heavy lift from her chest. The Emperor turned to leave. At the door, he stopped. Alara, he said. From this day forward, you are no longer a guest. She looked up. You are under my direct protection, he said. Any who touch you will answer to me. The door closed behind him. Alara looked down at the sleeping hatchlings. She whispered, we survived. But deep inside, she knew this was not the end. The rebels had failed. The mages had watched. And the Empire was changing, whether it wanted to or not. The palace did not celebrate the victory. There were no banners, no loud music, no public speeches. The damaged halls were repaired in silence. Guards doubled their patrols. Mages met behind closed doors. Everyone felt it. Something was breaking inside the Empire. Alara felt it too. Days passed after the attack. The hatchlings recovered quickly. They slept longer now. They ate calmly. They followed Alara everywhere, crawling after her like curious children. Sometimes they chirped softly when they saw her. But outside the nursery, eyes watched. Alara noticed servants whispering when she passed. Some bowed deeply, others looked away. A few stared with clear hatred. The imperial doctor warned her one evening, you should not walk alone. Alara frowned. Why? The doctor hesitated. Because not everyone agrees with the Emperor. Alara nodded slowly. They never do. That night, the Emperor called a council. Alara was not invited. But she heard about it anyway. The great hall filled with dragon lords, generals, and high mages. The Emperor stood at the center, his presence heavy. They failed, one lord said. The rebels retreated. Yes, the Emperor replied. Because my heirs survived. A mage stepped forward, the same silver-horned mage who had threatened Alara before. They survived because of a human, the mage said. That is the problem, the hall murmured. The mage continued. The Empire is built on strength, on dominance, on fear. Now whispers spread that compassion saved the Emperor's blood. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. It did. The mage raised his chin. And that makes you vulnerable. Silence fell. The Emperor's voice dropped. Say that again. The mage did not back down. Your Majesty, history will remember. This, as the moment dragon rule softened. Your children cling to a human. They listen to her voice. They calm under her touch. He paused. What happens when they rule? The Emperor stared at him. They will rule wisely. The mage's eyes flashed. They will rule weakly. The Emperor took one slow step forward. Enough, he said, but the damage was done. The council ended without unity, and that night the palace changed. Alara woke to a strange feeling. Silence. Too much silence. She sat up and listened. No footsteps, no distant voices. Only the soft breathing of the hatchlings. Then she smelled something. Smoke. Not battle smoke. Magic. Alara stood quickly and moved to the door. It was locked. Her heart jumped. Alara, a voice whispered urgently from the other side. The doctor. She rushed forward. What's happening? Stay back, he said. The mages have moved. Alara's stomach dropped. Moved how? They are taking control of the palace wards, he said. They believe the Emperor has lost balance. They plan to remove the cause. Alara's breath caught. Me. Yes, the doctor said. And the hatchlings. Alara looked back at the sleeping dragons. They would never, they would. The doctor interrupted. To them, blood purity matters more than life. The door shook suddenly. Magic flared against it. The hatchlings woke and began to cry. Alara rushed back to them, kneeling. Hey, she whispered. It's okay. The cries grew louder. The door cracked. Light spilled through. Alara looked around desperately. There was no escape. The nursery doors burst open. 4 high mages entered, robes glowing with power. The silver-horned mage stood among them. Alara, he said calmly. This will be quick. Guards lay unconscious behind them. Alara stood, placing herself in front of the hatchlings. You can't, she said. The Emperor. The Emperor is occupied, the mage said. And when he arrives, it will be too late. The hatchlings hissed and released small flames. The mages raised shields. Alara spread her arms wider. They are children. They are weapons, the mage replied. Alara's voice shook, but she did not move. Then kill me first. The mage studied her. For a moment doubt flickered, then he hardened. Very well. Magic surged. The air screamed. Suddenly a roar shook the palace. The walls trembled. The mages froze. A massive shadow filled the doorway. The emperor. He burst through the wall, stone exploding around him. His eyes burned with fury. Step away, he commanded. The mages turned. The silver-horned mage raised his hands. Your Majesty, we act for the Empire. The Emperor advanced slowly. You act against my blood. The mage's voice trembled slightly. You are blinded. The Emperor stopped inches away from him. Look, he said. The hatchlings peeked from behind Alara. They were not attacking. They were not screaming. They were watching, calm. The Emperor spoke softly. This human did what your power could not. The mage hesitated. Then one mage made a mistake. He aimed a spell at Alara. The hatchlings screamed. Fire exploded, not wildfire, controlled fire. 3 streams of flame struck the mage shields with perfect aim. The mages were thrown back. The Emperor roared and unleashed his full power. The room shook. When it ended, the mages lay defeated on the floor, their magic broken. The silver-horned mage knelt, shaking. You have chosen her over tradition, he whispered. The Emperor looked down at him. No, he said, I chose my children. The mage was taken away. The palace was silent again. Later, Alara sat in the nursery, shaking. The Emperor entered quietly. You should have run, he said. Alara looked up. I couldn't. The Emperor studied her. You defied mages. You faced death. Alara swallowed. They were going to hurt the babies. The Emperor nodded. You have proven something today, he said. Not just to me. Alara frowned. What? That strength has many forms, he said, and the Empire has forgotten that. He knelt slowly, lowering himself to her level. This path will change everything, he said. My enemies will adapt. My allies will fear. My children will grow differently. Alara met his gaze, then guide them. The Emperor's eyes softened, just slightly. I will, he said. With you. That night a decree spread through the Empire. The human nurse was now imperial guardian of the heirs. Any harm to her was treason. The Empire trembled. But far away in the shadows, survivors of the Mage Order whispered, if the children could not be taken, they would be turned, and the final test would come, soon. The Empire held its breath. Weeks passed after the Mage Rebellion, but peace did not return. It only pretended to. Ships moved quietly. Messages were encrypted. Borders tightened. Everyone knew something was coming. Alara felt it every day. The hatchlings were no longer tiny. Their wings grew stronger. Their scales darkened slightly, showing hints of deep gold and red. Their fire became warmer, controlled, never wild. They listened when Alara spoke. They followed her calmly. They slept without fear. They were changing. So was the Emperor. He visited the nursery often now. He watched, not as a ruler, but as a father. He spoke less. He observed more. He learned. But enemies learned too. One night, the palace alarms did not scream. That was the first sign. The lights dimmed suddenly. The air grew cold. Alara looked up from the hatchlings. Something was wrong. The hatchlings lifted their heads at the same time. They growled, not in fear, in warning. Alara stood slowly. The nursery doors melted, not exploded. Melted. Dark energy poured inside, thick and heavy. Figures stepped through the smoke. Not mages. Something worse. Void-touched dragons, former elites who had joined the Forbidden Order after the rebellion. Their scales were cracked and black. Their eyes glowed empty blue. Their magic twisted the air. You should have died quietly, human one said. Alara stepped in front of the hatchlings. You will not touch them, she said. The void dragon laughed. You cannot stop us. Behind Alara, the hatchlings growled again. The void dragons raised their claws. Before Alara could move, the hatchlings stepped forward. Together, they did not breathe wildfire. They formed a circle. Their fire merged into a single golden barrier. The void magic hit it and shattered. The attackers froze. What is this? One whispered. Alara stared. She had never taught them that. The hatchlings moved with calm purpose. They attacked together, not with rage, but with precision. Fire struck weak points. Wings created force. Tails swept legs. They fought like trained soldiers. No, like guardians. The void dragons retreated, but one remained. He lunged toward Alara. Alara did not run. She raised her arms. The hatchlings screamed. The Emperor arrived like a storm. He crushed the void dragon into the floor. Silence followed. The Emperor turned to his children. They stood tall, not afraid. He looked at Alara. You taught them balance, he said. Alara shook her head. I taught them trust. The Emperor straightened. Then the Empire will change. The next day the Emperor made his final move. He called the entire Empire to witness. Dragon lords, allies, rivals, even humans were invited. The palace hall was filled. The Emperor stood before them. My heirs survived chaos, he said. They survived fear. They survived betrayal. He looked at Alara. They did not survive because of power. Murmurs spread. They survived because of humanity. Gasps echoed. The Emperor raised his voice. From this day the Empire will be ruled not only by strength, but by understanding. Some roared in anger. Others bowed. The Emperor continued. The old orders are dissolved. The void cult is hunted, and my heirs will be raised with wisdom. He placed a claw on Alara's shoulder. This human will remain their guide. A dragon lord shouted, You break tradition. The Emperor's eyes burned. I remake. That night, Alara stood alone in the nursery. The hatchlings slept peacefully. The Emperor entered quietly. You will be hated, he said. Alara smiled softly. I already am. You will be targeted, he continued. Alara nodded. I know. The Emperor paused. You could leave, he said. I would protect you. Alara looked at the hatchlings. I won't, she said. They still need me. The Emperor bowed his head. A dragon emperor bowing to a human. History shifted. Years passed. The hatchlings grew into legends. Not feared. Respected. They ruled worlds without burning them. They listened. They healed. They protected. And beside them always stood a human who had once been considered weak. The galaxy learned a new truth. Humanity was not strong because it destroyed. Humanity was strong because it cared. And that was why, when the stars finally went dark, it was humans who lit them again.